Hello and namaste everyone. Today I am here with a game of Altibox Norway Chess 2020, and it's a game of Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen won the game and won the tournament. Still a one round to go. Moreover, he won 63 euro, which is the first prize, and Magnus Carlsen, current world champion, just won the game of Altibox Norway Chess 2020, winning a game with Alireza Firouzja. Round 10 still to go, and he is leading with 19.5 points, and other are behind him. Alireza Firouzja is only with 15.5, and he just wins the tournament without playing the round 10. And this is the picture which was posted in chess 24. Now we'll go back to the game. Let's see what was happening in the game and how did Alireza Firouzja just blunder in the end game, which was totally draw, and he lost the game. Let's start the game. Here Alireza Firouzja is white, whereas Magnus Carlsen is black, and the game was started with knight to f3, knight to f6, g3, c5 was played, and king's Indian is on the boards. Bishop to g2, knight c6, 2-9 variation castles, e5 was then played, and in order to block the e4, Alireza Firouzja just played e4, and then after d6 protects the pawn on the e4 and c5, protects the pawn on the e5 and c5. Then after c3, this is the unusual line in the king's Indian. Most probably it's played knight to c3, but after c3, white planning is very simple for d4, just breaking the center of black. Then after g6 was played by Magnus, d4, c captures on d4, c captures on d4. Bishop to g4, pinning the knight, and somehow if other pieces are developed, then white could simply capture on the f3, and then after knight could capture on the d4, but it was not led by Alireza Firouzja, and he just captures the pawn on the e5, d captures on the e5, and after knight to c3 was played, bishop to g7, s3, moving away the bishop, and he just simply captures on the f3, queen captures on d8, rook captures on d8, bishop captures on f3. It's totally equal at this moment. Till the end, it was equal. Just at the end king movement, which was really great end game, and we will just move towards the end game very fast because it's really interesting to see, and you might do the same mistake in the opposition. That really counts, and Alireza just blundered over there and just lost the game. We will be moving a little bit faster towards the end game because it's really interesting. And castle was played, king to z2, and knight to d4 was played by Magnus. Bishop to g5 was played at 6th, leading white to capture the knight on the f6. If you not capture an f6, knight could not go to the d5. So here Alireza Firouzja just captures an f6, and bishop captures an f6. White could also play with the bishop pair, but knight on the d5 is more stronger than bishop pair, so he just simply captures on the f6, and then after knight on d5 is more stronger. Rook to d6, rook ac1 was played, bishop to c8, not letting white to come on the c7. 7th rank was really important, so he didn't let that to happen. Rook fd1 was then played, then after king to g7, knight e3, rook a6 attacks the pawn, which is protected simply by a3. Then after h5, knight to c4 attacks the pawn, and which was defended by bishop to f6 by Magnus. h4, it's totally equal position for both the players. There's no any advantage, no any winning move. So here rook to c8 was played, knight goes back to e3, rook a6, rook captures on c6, rook captures on c6, rook to d3. Here rook can come to the c1, but that's not so important over here. And after bishop to d8 was played, and bishop to d1 was moved by Alireza Firouzja. Most probably he's trying for bishop to a4 to come, rook to c1, and bishop to b3 was played. Here knight on d4 is really strong, and of course if your knight is on center square, you will not be trying to extend with the bishop on the b3. So he just played, Magnus just played b5, rook to d1 was then played, trying to extend the rook. Here rook on c1 could go for rook to b1 and try to capture the pawn. So here black have the active rook, so he want to capture or exchange with the passive rook. Rook goes back to the c8. Here rook on d1 is passive while compared to the rook on the c8. He have the open file, whereas Alireza Firouzja do not have the open file, and he have the passive rook while Magnus Carlsen have active rook. This might be a little bit advantage, but overall the game is equal. Bishop to a2 protects the bishop. a5 was then played. Rook to d3 again. a4 was played. King to f1. Bishop to d6. Bishop to d6 was then played, and rook to c3 was played, and rook captures on c3. B captures on c3. Black have knight and pawn structure on e5, which is not captured. So he just played knight to b3. An interesting move. If you capture this, then that will be a blunder because pawn captures and you cannot defend the queen. So you could never capture the pawn. You could never capture the knight on b3. And then after, if you capture this, then pawn captures and it's immediate winning after this one. You should, if knight comes on the d1, then knight have to always stay on this diagonal and just simply win. After f5 or even after bishop to c5, it's totally winning. Both the bishop to c5, you can go and capture the pawn and go for b2, and if you push the pawn, then simply captures and win the pawn. So here knight b3 is really good move for Magnus Carlsen. King to e1 was then played. Bishop to c5 attacks the pawn, and knight goes to c2. All the pieces of white are passive. Now he have to sit over here and guard the pawn. That's why here Magnus had some advantage to win the pawn. Knight to c1 was then played. Bishop goes back to d5. Knight d3 check. King goes there. Knight captures on df2. Now here Magnus won a pawn, but still the game was in draw position. Bishop to c6 attacks the pawn. Pawn push. Knight to e3. Knight to h1 attacks the pawn again. Knight to f1. Bishop captures on a3. B captures on b5. Bishop to b2. Bishop captures, and after bishop captures on c3. Here black is a pawn up, but still overall the game is in the draw's position. However, it didn't end with draw. Alireza Firouzja lost a game with the lack of opposition. King to f3 and bishop to d4 was played. g4 has captures on g4. King captures on g4. Knight to f2 check. King to f3. King to h6 was then played. Knight to g3. Knight to d3 then was played. Bishop to e8. Knight to f4. Knight to e2. Knight to e6, bishop to f7, knight to c5, knight to g3, then after bishop to c3, h5 was then played, bishop to e1, bishop captures on g6, bishop captures on g3, king captures on g3, king to g5, king f3, knight comes on b3, bishop to f7, knight d4 check, king goes to g3, knight to e2 check, king goes on f3, knight goes on f4, king goes on g3, and knight captures in h5, bishop captures in h5, king captures in f5. This is draw's position. However, how to draw this position, you should be very well knowledge of king pawn in game, and if you know about that, means Alireza Firouzja just played really good, but in the time pressure he just blundered a move and he just lost a game. Let's see how does that happen. This is a really interesting topic for king pawn in game. If you do not know about that, you can just look at it and you can find how did Alireza Firouzja just blunder. Here king to h3 was played, and that's really a good move. King to h6. What happens if king to g5? King to g5, it could be followed with king to g3, and king to h6 again could lead king to h4, just taking the opposition, and king goes here and again take the opposition. This is how you should play, like king goes on the h4, king comes here and again king to g4 and take the opposition. Similarly, if in the game king to h6 was played and it was followed by king to h4, and then after king to g7 was played. What happened if king to g6? How could you continue with king to g6? If king to g6, it could be king to h4 and king to h7. What happened if king to h5? If king to h5, that will be a blunder move, because if king to h5, then it will be a blunder for you, because if king to h5, you can play king to g7 and king to h4. There is king to h6. This triangulation is the main important topic over here, because Now it's your top. Now it's your turn, and your opponent has taken the opposition. King to g4 and king to g6. Now you have to move your king like this, and f5 is winning move over here. That means if your opponent will be able to take the opposition, then you will be losing over here. So after king to h7, if you will play king to h5, that will be losing over here, guys. So you have to think king to h5, then you have to play king to h3. Another topic over here in the king pawn endgame is number of square, that is distance opposition. You have to take the opposition, but that should be a distance opposition. There is odd number of square difference between each other, so it's called distance opposition. If you are able to take the distance opposition, then you will be able to take the opposition when your opponent king comes over here. King to g8, then you can play again king to g4. You are again taking the distance opposition, and then after if king comes here, do not move hurry with king to f5. If you will move king to f5, that will be again losing for you. Here again you have to play king to f3. If king to f5, then again you have king to g7 and king goes there, and you will be able to give your opponent the opposition. So always think of not giving the opposition. You have to think of taking the opposition and not giving the opposition. So after king to f3, again you have to play king to f7, sorry, you have to play again king to f3 and not let your opponent to take the opposition. And in this game, king to e7, then king to e3 can be played, and king to f8, then again you can simply go and take the opposition. Like if number of square you can calculate, this is 4, and you have to play king to f2. It should be odd number of square to take the opposition. Similarly, after king to f3, king to e7. So in the game, it was played king to g7, and then after king to d3, king to f8, king to f2. Yes, this is the moment I'm talking about. Look at this, guys. You can calculate number of square. Look at this. Number of square is 5, which means it is odd number of square, and it means distance opposition is taken by white. So you'll be not able to take the opposition when you'll become forward to facing each other. That's why here king to f2 is the accurate move. Then after king to e7 was played, king to e2 was played, king to e8, king to e3, king to d7, and then after king to d3 was played. Here you can see again it is taken distance opposition by white as the number of square. Then after king to d6 was played, and here just white blunder, and that was happened by Alireza Firouzja. You can see what could be the move that could draw the position. As I have said you how to take the distance opposition, you can pause the video and find the answer. Yes, the answer was very simple, but it was not played, and Alireza Firouzja just blundered by playing to king to c3, and Magnus Carlsen just played king to c5 and won the game. You can see, guys, this is winning after taking the opposition. Magnus Carlsen won the game, and Alireza Firouzja just resigned after this. The draw position over here was very simple, and it's king to d2 because you have odd number of square, and that is called distance opposition. When your opponent come to the c5, then you can simply go to c3 and do not let it to happen. After king to d2, you could, if your opponent just played king to c6, then you have to play king to c2 again king to c5, then king to c3, king goes on b5, king b3, king b6, you can go for king b2 again. This is how you could play king to c6, king to c2, king c5, and king to c3, not letting your opponent to come inside on your territory and win the game. But after king to c3, your Magnus Carlsen could simply win after king to c5. Let's see how the game would continue and how could Magnus win the game. Yes, Alireza Firouzja have to play king to d3, and Magnus could simply come to king to b4, and after king to d2, he could simply play this move, king to c4, and then after king goes on e3, king to c3 is coming up, and king to f2, king to d4 is coming up, king to e, then after king to d3, and Magnus could simply capture the pawn, and it's totally winning for Magnus Carlsen. This is how Magnus won Alireza Firouzja, and of course won the tournament Altibox Norway Chess 2020, and we like to congratulate again for winning him. Still one round is left. Tomorrow it will be round 10, and yes, Alireza Firouzja is at the second, who was competing with Magnus Carlsen, but Magnus didn't let it to happen. Magnus won this game and won the tournament overall. Thank you everyone. If you do like the video, hit the subscribe button over there if you have not done that, and if you like the video, click the like button. Thank you everyone, and whoever want to support us, the link of the support is given on the screen and also in the description below. Thank you and bye bye. See you in the next video. Thank you and bye bye.